The transition stabilizes. But what's the future hold? I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, November 30th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up down below. We'd be happy to reply. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the super thanks button down below. And with that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Tim Caston, B. Nadine, Barry Hill, Glendale Trojan, Evolution Moto, Luke Hoffman, E. Slate, Recognize This, and Ben Wynn is the big contributor for the week. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. With that, let's get to work. We'll start by looking at significant wave heights across the entire planet. Starting up in the North Pacific, we see remnants of a gale still with 20-foot seas, but you see a significant swell front pushing into the Hawaiian Islands. Swell, as you can see, is hitting the Hawaiian Islands, and some smaller version of it is pushing towards the U.S. West Coast. At the same time, a new gale is trying to get organized here over the Dateline region. Not a whole lot expected from that. In the South Pacific, not really anything happening. A tiny area of 20-foot seas, producing nothing that will survive the long journey up to the north. In the North Atlantic, a gale with 27.9-foot seas right there, the highest seas over the entire image or domain. Those seas are aimed towards Europe, mainly Ireland, Scotland, and into the Bay of Biscay and Portugal. In the South Atlantic, really nothing going on. Remnants of a gale passing south of South Africa. You can see it also here, trying to make its way into the Indian Ocean, but otherwise nothing really happening for the Indian Ocean. But before we get into all that, let's take a look at current conditions. We're going to look at the buoys. Starting up north, Grays Harbor buoy number 036, off the border there between Oregon and Washington. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy, starting at down at 5-second period. 5 seconds, that'd be just like unrideable wind chop. The whole way up to 33.3-second period energy. Very strong swell energy. We have 1/10 of a foot there. The reality is, though, most of the energy is right here in the 13.3-second period band. 3.9 feet of energy right at that band, but pure swell is really defined by the energy not only at the peak, but off on the shoulders too. We use an algorithm to try to tease that all out. Primary swell, 5.9 feet at 13.1 seconds from 255 degrees, making surf at about 7.7 feet at a standard beach break with no swell enhancing bathymetry. That's about what it was when I looked earlier today. And then some wind swell in the mix. 3.8 feet at 9.8 seconds, again from 251 degrees, adding probably just a little bit of not a whole lot of anything. 3.5 foot surf buried underneath all that. Moving down to San Francisco, buoy 46026 there in the channel, the Golden Gate Channel, out a bit from the coast. Same sort of profile, not as pronounced, a bit of energy here in the 13-second period range, and some wind swell in the mix. Primary swell, 3.8 feet, 12.7 seconds from 264 degrees, making surf at 5 foot. There were still sets at Ocean Beach, 2 feet overhead, even at sunset. And secondary swell, 2.8 feet at 9.6 seconds from 281 degrees, adding a little bit of wind swell in the mix. Down to Southern California, the Point Loma South buoy there, just off of more or less San Diego, buoy 191. And a smaller version of the same profile, swell attenuated by the Channel Islands. Primary swell, you see at 3 feet, 13.5 seconds from 245 degrees. Swell gets turned a little bit by the Channel Islands. There's also some southern hemiswell buried in there as well. Surf heights, 4 feet. Yeah, there were head-high sets or so at top spots today. Secondary swell, 1.2 feet at 9.9 seconds from 253 degrees. Insignificant. And then to the standout for the day, the Waimea Bay buoy, buoy 106. You can see a clear spike of energy somewhere between 15.4 and 16.7 seconds. Eyeballing it, I'll call it 16.2 seconds, maybe. Okay, and little bits of energy off on either side, but that really takes the cake. Primary swell, 12.5 feet at 16 seconds from 310 degrees, making surf 20 feet. Maybe that's a little exaggeration. Hard to say. I didn't watch a whole lot today, but clearly it was 15-foot Hawaiian. Waimea Bay was breaking, and there were people out, and there were definitely waves. Then some secondary swell, 5.8 feet at 12.4 seconds from 306 degrees. But I think that was more just shoulder energy off the main swell. So let's do a quick review of what has been happening in the ocean for the past 7 days. Going back to Sunday, the 23rd of November, 12Z run of the model. This is the 0Z Hindcast, which is basically what the model thinks is ground truth. It assimilates buoy data, satellite data, and any other data it can get to try to get its best estimate of what's happening. On Sunday, there was a gale with 31-foot seas. That's last Sunday, 31-foot seas. As you see here, it fell southeast, provided swell for the Hawaiian Islands. You see this swell front hitting. That was like on Wednesday evening, Thursday. Another little tiny gale blew up here, pushing off to the northeast, which has provided swell for California. But the main focus was this gale here. We'll go back just a little bit. It started on Wednesday night, built as it moved towards the dateline on Thursday with 35-foot seas, building to 37 feet. That was Thursday evening. Continuing into Friday morning, mellowed out with 36-foot seas, pushing over the dateline into the western Gulf of Alaska. By Saturday morning, it was fading with seas down to 30 feet or so. And here we are, Sunday, right before sunrise, the swell pushing into the Hawaiian Islands, and then pretty solid as the day continued. Still, even at this point in time, with a theoretical 19-foot Hawaiian size waves hitting, that's a pretty good amount of swell. Now, most of the energy from this system, in fact, we'll go back and take a look here real quick. It was pushing off to the east, but remember, this gale was just maybe 25, 30 degrees off axis to the Hawaiian Islands. Most of the energy is to hit the Hawaiian Islands. What pushes into California, well, it's got a lot further to travel. It's like, 1,500 nautical miles into the San Francisco Bay Area. And so do not expect size anywhere near like what Hawaii is seeing. But rideable surf will result from a more westerly angle than anything we've had so far this year, which should put Southern California in play for rideable waves. Down to the southern hemi over the past week, starting the 23rd of November. We're looking for anything 20 foot. What do we have there? 20. Is that 25? Sure enough, 25-foot seas over a little tiny area for 6 hours. I don't know that, and that was on Thursday, so I don't expect any swell to result from that. I mean, it's just not the time of year, and that was it. To the North Atlantic a week ago, we'll put this into motion, see what has happened. You see a series of relatively weaker gales until we got into Thursday, the 27th of November. 36-foot seas building to 42 feet, building to 43 feet, 44 feet, but plowing right into pretty much Ireland and Scotland. I don't know how rideable that was, but I'm sure we'll see videos, if we haven't seen it already, coming out for any place that was rideable. Then here we get into Saturday into Sunday today. Gale trying to develop off the southern tip of Greenland. And current time, 27-foot seas pushing off or targeting Europe reasonably well. We'll see what the forecast has for that. Then over the past week for the South Atlantic, one would not expect a whole lot. There was a gale with 28, 29-foot seas targeted South Africa. That the swell from it, you see it hitting on Tuesday into Wednesday. That has come and gone. We're looking for any other hope. A gale with 25-foot seas as of Saturday, building to 27, 28 feet on Sunday today. So maybe some small swell energy will push up into South Africa, but seems like the pattern, as would be expected, is calming down. And finally, for the Indian Ocean, going back a week, looking at the pattern, yes, we saw the gales pushing under South Africa. Anything here at all? Pretty quiet. Normally, this part of the world is amazingly consistent, but no, as of right now, really nothing happening, nothing significant. You do see little bits of energy pushing north, but it seems like the swell pattern definitely shutting down. So what does the future hold short term for the next week? We're going to start by looking at Jetstream level winds, and we're focusing on the North Pacific now. These winds up at about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet to the south. We see one here and another piece of a leftover one here. What that helps do is create a counterclockwise flow aloft. That is the hallmark of low pressure. It also manifests itself down at the ocean surface. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Those winds get traction on the ocean surface, generating seas. Those seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, the lesser period elements decay away, exposing swell. And swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So we definitely have a consolidated jet stream flow, not particularly strong, but good enough, 130 knot winds, supporting a trough developing on the dateline region. But we have the opposite of trough here off of California, a big ridge, the jet pushing to the north. That creates a clockwise flow, and that is the hallmark of high pressure doing nothing to generate surf. But you see the jet pushes inland and then falls hard south and creates this backdoor trough here off of, I'll say, Southern California. I don't know that it really is doing anything from a weather perspective or from a swell perspective, but I think it's ushering in cooler air pushing over this area and keeping a more or less generally light wind flow across the area. So really just more of a meteorological oddity than anything meaningful from swell perspective. As we get into Monday, the new trough starts building over the dateline. The ridge continues. In fact, the cutoff low here gets completely cut off from the main flow and pretty much fades away. New backdoor trough sets up, but the real focus is this low over the dateline as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday until it starts pinching off severely. Now, notice the jet. We have a bit of a problem here. The jet swings way to the north, up into the Bering Sea, dropping hard south down to like 15 north, way back up to the north, down. I mean, too radical a swing, too much of radical swings in the jet stream creates troughs, but they all get pinched off and weird and just kind of strange. So I'm not expecting a whole lot here. And then as we get into Friday, the 5th of December, the trough completely cuts off. Notice jet, you can't see it, but if you look, the jet goes way up north into the Bering Sea and is just basically a mess. It's losing its organization, can't find its footing with cut-off troughs in various places and just kind of a mess. As we get into a week from now, Sunday, though, the jet seems to be trying to pull itself back together, running more or less east on the 35 north latitude line with winds to 190 knots in one pocket there, but still, because of the whipsawing of the troughs and the ridges and all, it's going to take a little bit for the atmosphere to stabilize before we get back into a decent swell-producing pattern. So things not so looking good pretty much from here forward for the next week. Short term, that is. So let's go see what happens down at the ocean surface. It takes winds blowing on the ocean surface to generate seas. So the jet stream is just more like a foundation, the fuel for the storm, but then you actually have to have a storm. As we get into Sunday, Monday, here we know we have a trough here, a gale trying to organize something on the front here, 45 knot winds aimed off to the east and 30 knot winds aimed more or less south at Hawaii. But this part of the gale just races up north, probably won't get hardly any traction. This is the main fetch here, 30, 35 knot winds targeting Hawaii. That's good for like 12 to 13 second period swell. The winds build more 35 knots as we get into Tuesday, the 2nd of December, and then that starts fading off as we get into Wednesday. You notice sort of a light high pressure regime off of California. Another gale develops here off the Kuril Islands, only produces 35 knot west winds, and even that's pretty short-lived, so nothing expected there. And as we kind of alluded to looking at the Jetstream, everything just kind of unorganized. Now, this little gale is forecast trying to develop here over the North Dateline region with 45 knot winds as we get into, well, when did it actually start? Probably about there, Saturday. So that's 6 days from now. Hanging out on the North Dateline region into Sunday. And then as the jet starts getting more organized, you notice a series of fetch areas starting to develop north of the Jetstream, offering maybe some hope for the future. So what effect are those winds going to have on the ocean surface? We're looking at significant wave heights, the forecast for the North Pacific over the next week. We know there is the fading remnants of that previous gale on the dateline, still with 20-foot seas pushing off to the east. A little bit of fetch trying to organize here associated with the new fetch of 30 to 35 knot winds falling south. You see there was this gale, but it's pushing north so quick, no swell to result from that. 22-foot seas somewhat targeting Hawaii as we get into Tuesday, building to 24, 25 feet, let's say, right here. Mainly, and you see the arrows, aim sort of southeast, so Hawaii should get some swell from this. Don't really think anything's going to happen relative to California, though. That all fades out as we get into Thursday. The other gale off the Kuril Islands does basically nothing. We see a little area of, 18, 19-foot seas pushing into Washington on Friday. Don't know if that's going to happen. And then we're into Saturday. The new gale, look at how tiny this area of 31-foot seas are. I don't know that we'll really see any meaningful swell from that. Background swell is what I'd call it. So we get into Sunday, and here's our final frame of the model. It does hold for a while, so that does bode well. And you see, again, that developing pattern along this line here as the jet stream tries to get itself back into gear. For the South Pacific, we'll put this into motion, but the expectation is really nothing should be happening as we're now getting well into December. We're into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the 7th of December, and as expected, no activity. For the North Atlantic, so here's our gale south of Greenland producing 27.9 foot seas, building to 31 feet, 31.9 feet on Monday. Pretty much like the last one, pushing right up to the coast of Ireland, focused a bit more south, so this opens up all these breaks here in France and Portugal to get swell from that. Another gale forecast, stronger one as we get into Wednesday, 37-foot seas, 36, 39 foot, 42 feet, pushing very close to the coast here. Now, this looks like it could be a significant swell producer, but also probably a bunch of wind, seeing how it's moving right into the coast there. We're on Thursday, the 4th of December. Another one right behind that. Really does sort of seem like as the North Pacific falls apart, the North Atlantic is going to be the beneficiary of that. So we get into Saturday, another series, and then here Saturday, the 6th of December, 45-foot seas, continuing 44 feet. This looks like a definite swell producer for big wave spots in Portugal and up into Ireland for sure. And you see the last frame, it lifting off to the northeast. So jet stream obviously sinking south over the North Atlantic. For the South Atlantic, here we are, current time, put this into motion. Again, expectations pretty low. Also notice the melting of ice theoretically in here. There's actually directional wave data. I mean, I don't know how deep that water is or how exposed it is or even whether it's normal, but we are seeing it. We're into Saturday and Sunday, really nothing happening. Oh, we got 2 more frames here. Let's go pull that out. There you go. Okay. And then to the Indian Ocean. in motion. Do we see anything? A little area of 30-foot seas south of Australia on like Monday night, Tuesday. Another area of 20-foot or so seas pushing pretty much into Tasmania on Thursday. Another little tiny gale. Oh, trying to get organized. 28-foot seas building to 29 feet. This is on Saturday into Sunday, the 7th of December, and lifting off to the east-northeast. So, and you could see the actual beginnings of a swell front targeting Western Australia and sideband energy probably up into Bali. If that all happens, it's almost a week out, so don't trust the models too much on that. Local wind forecast for California and Hawaii. Hawaii there, Southern California here, Point Conception there, Monterey Bay, San Francisco Bay, and then the Oregon-California border here. We'll put this into motion. Sunday, you see this sort of a generalized northwest wind pattern, 15 knots. This is right at around sunset. Mainly for Northern California and Central California, Southern California, well protected. A light wind regime, southeast 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands, not too bad. Monday, kind of a repeat for Hawaii and for North and Central California. So we get into Tuesday, even lighter wind regime Tuesday morning, light trades, 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. And then Tuesday evening, the beginnings of what looks like high pressure and a pressure gradient building pushing into Cape Mendocino area, 20 to 25 knot northwest winds, but light winds down into Central California. But by Wednesday, here you go. Northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. So near the coast, maybe only 10 knots, at least early. Let's see, by the afternoon. Yeah, even then it holds pretty well. Trades very light for the Hawaiian Islands. You see something trying to organize here. Let's get into Thursday, see what happens. Nope, California doing okay. Still the same kind of consistent pattern. Trades 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. And here we go. High pressure exploding as we get into late Thursday into Friday. Let's get to Friday morning. There you go. 20 knot trades for the Hawaiian Islands. California protected for the moment, probably because there's low pressure here pushing into the Pacific Northwest. When it fades, well, you get into even Friday afternoon, northwest winds 15 knots. Saturday, not so bad. Low pressure sort of builds. Trade's still pretty good for the Hawaiian Islands, 15 plus knots. And then Sunday, here we go. Light wind regime for California. Trades back to 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Kind of a seasonally normal pattern, if you will. I mean, keep waiting for high pressure to really explode and just like get the trades nuking, but it's not happening yet, at least relative to the Hawaiian Islands. Precipitation forecast for California, again, right here, Southern California, Central, Northern California. The expectation, given the weird split jet stream, is that it pretty much takes the jet pushing into California to get anything meaningful. We're into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, some rain up into Cape Mendocino. Does it progress? No, if anything, it retrogrades. And then Saturday tries to build falling south, maybe even a hint of snow showers for a nanosecond for Tahoe, but no further south. And then we're into Sunday. Another little pulse trying to do the same thing, but not making it very much. So by and large, the most part, the dividing line has been all season the Oregon-California border, Cape Mendocino getting the whatever there is to get, and we remain high and dry for the next week south of there. The snow forecast dashboard for Palisades, Tahoe, formerly Squaw Valley, or I think more aptly named Olympic Valley. Nothing, but you do see, well, here's that little bit of, a couple of hours of snow, give it 1 inch. And then, but this version of the model goes out 10 days. So you see a foot, maybe 14 inches of snow. This morning's run of the model had it up at like 48 or 50 inches. So wildly inaccurate out, 10 days. I don't even believe it's 7 days, much less 10. But it does hint that as the jet stream heals and starts directing, more zonal or flat west to east across the Pacific, California could be targeted at least down as far as here. Let's go take a look at Mammoth. Yeah, and Mammoth just, like 2.5, 3 hours south of Palisades, Tahoe, and we're down to an inch or two at best. The freeze level or the snow level for Palisades, Tahoe, if there was precipitation in the forecast, the red would be liquid precipitation, the gray would be sleet. The right where the gray and the white line meet, that's 32 degrees. So you're seeing, and this is the base of Palisades, Tahoe, 6,200 feet. This is the summit, 9,000 feet. You see snow level on Monday up at like 12,500 feet, dipping down on the 3rd to almost the base, like 6,400 feet, but then right back up again into the 10 to 11,000 foot range into, I think this is Saturday. Then after that, snow levels and things get much colder up in the mountains. Now all we need is the push of the jet and precip coming into the California coast. The model's going out 2 weeks. If you look, there is significant snow in the forecast. Again, I don't believe a model a week out, much less 2 weeks out, but when you're desperate, you'll take anything you can get. So maybe, just maybe, a change in the pattern is coming. Whether it makes it south into Southern California, well, the more precip that comes into, I'll call it Central California, the better the odds for Southern California. All right, so let's go do a quick look at surf forecasts for a couple locations. Columbia River area, Portland, Oregon, the intersection of Oregon and Washington. Surf heights declining, but then as we get into Monday and Tuesday, as the new swell hits, 10 feet, 9 feet sort of thing, slowly trickling down through the week. And then next weekend, another bout of swell, 12 foot, fading to 8 feet, and then back up into the 11-foot range. Winds looking to be pretty much onshore the whole way into, for all of next weekend, and then less and offshore at times during the week. Ocean Beach, San Francisco. Monday, swell starts building a little bit. By Tuesday, up to about 9 feet. Now, remember, Hawaii was 15, 18 feet, something like that, so half the size in Northern California. Trickling down as we get into Wednesday, and then pretty small Friday. Little notch up on Saturday and Sunday. Surf in the 5-foot range. Let's go look at swell heights here. Building 6 feet at 15 seconds on Tuesday, something like that, 6 feet at 16 seconds, then down to 4.5 feet at 14 seconds, dropping out a bit of wind swell in there. Then next weekend, 4.5 feet at 11 to 12 seconds. San Diego, Southern California, yes, there is some north swell. That's really more northwesterly. Forecast moving in on Tuesday and Wednesday. Surf heights 3.5 feet. Top spots that can handle a 290 to 292 degree angle swell might eke out a little bit more size. And then things drop right down after that. Swell heights 2.5 feet at 15 to 16 seconds sort of thing. And with dribbling energy out into Thursday and maybe even early Friday. The North Shore of Oahu. All right, Sunday, here we go. Your 15, 16-foot surf dribbling down on Monday to just 10 or 11 feet, which would be really nice. And Tuesday, 7 feet, hanging in about the 5-foot range. New swell building in, that north angled swell, like 13-second period stuff on Wednesday into Thursday and Friday, and then fading from there. You see the trades starting to pick up as we get into Friday. Swell heights, well, we go from 10 feet at 16 seconds on Monday to 7 at 14. Tuesday, we'll call it 5 at 12. The new swell starts building in about Thursday, 6 at 13 to 14, 6.5 at 13, and then fading down from there. So not so bad a pattern. Surf all week long. Then a little stop over at Jefferies Bay, South Africa. Oh yeah, time zone, GMT plus 2 hours. Okay. Monday, Swell heights fading from 12 feet down to about 10 feet on Tuesday, Wednesday 8 feet, Thursday 6 feet, dropping down, and then a little bump up in about the 7.5 to 8 foot range Sunday and Monday. Swell heights fading from 9 at 13, 9 at 12, and then 6 at 10, so that's all wind swell, and then we get into the weekend, Sunday, 6.5 at 12, something like that. So, rideable surf still. And one last stop, Bali, which always seems to have surf. Surf heights 6 feet, 6 feet, fading as we get into Friday, Saturday down to 3 feet, and then down and bumping up a little into the 5 foot range on Sunday. Let's look at swell heights. 4 feet at 12 seconds, 4 feet at 13 to 14 seconds, 3.9 feet at 14 seconds. Then by the weekend, 4 feet at 11 seconds. So steady surf, nothing huge, but definitely rideable. All right, let's move on to the next part of the presentation, the long-term outlook, where we examine the two major weather oscillations that affect the potential for swell development. That is the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We're going to start with the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases to it, the active phase and the inactive phase. They rotate around the planet from west to east on the equator. Active phase on one side of the planet, inactive phase on the other. Again, moving west to east on the equator. When the active phase moves over your portion of the ocean, in this case, let's say the far west Pacific, it is a effectively a low-pressure system. It takes warm, moist air, sucks it up from the ocean surface, lifts it high up into the atmosphere. That energy feeds the jet stream, making the jet stream stronger, making it more capable of digging out troughs and supporting storm development. Also, because it's low pressure and trades are generated by high pressure, it helps dampen trade winds, if not out and out reversing them. And that is great for the formation of El Nino, though we're not expecting to have any of that kind of discussion this evening. Inactive phase of the MJO typically will follow 4 weeks behind, 4 to 6 weeks behind it. Inactive phase is a high pressure system. It creates falling air, steals energy from the jet stream. The jet stream starts falling apart. Sort of like what almost seems like is happening now over the Pacific, or at least over the next week. And because it's high pressure and trades are generated by high pressure, those two high pressures sync up, and it makes for stronger than normal trades. All right, so we're going to examine the trades over the equatorial Pacific. And yes, the MJO only affects like 5 degrees north, 5 degrees south on the equator, wherever it is. So we're looking at data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equator right there. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here, New Guinea there, date line right there. The arrow is what we're looking at. Trade winds, the longer the arrow, the stronger the trade. So moderate trades, moderate to strong trades in the East Pacific. Same thing over the Central Pacific. Same thing to the date line. We're not sure what's going on over here, but we will take a look at that, and that is very important. But it is not the actual wind speeds that matter. It's the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. You see here in the East Pacific trade, the arrow, there's pretty much no arrow. And again, only 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So yeah, maybe just normal trades. Same thing over the Central Pacific. On the date line, trades a little bit stronger than normal, but here on the south side of what we call the Kelvin wave generation area, this is where if you get west anomalies strong enough, they help create Kelvin waves. That helps fuel the development of El Nino. We see trades, if anything, almost reversed a little bit, at least dead calm. The pattern, well, we'll go take a look, in fact, right now over the past 5 days. 850 millibar of zonal wind anomalies, effectively. The oranges are westerly anomalies, the blues easterly anomalies. South America, Central America, New Guinea, 0 is the equator, the date line 180 right there. It's this area right here in the far west Pacific that we're most concerned about. If you get west anomalies here, that's where they will push that warm, moist air up into the atmosphere, feed the jet stream. The jet stream will be ripping across like here. That'll give it momentum and help it penetrate deeper into the U.S. West Coast, or at least into the Gulf of Alaska, making it more supportive of gale development. So we see this pattern, again, 0 degrees. This was on the 24th of November. Strong westerly anomalies over the maritime continent into the far west Pacific to about, I don't know, maybe 160, 165 east, something like that, and just right on the equator here, with east anomalies over in the East Pacific. That pattern continued on the 25th, the 26th, but then notice on the 27th, the strong east winds that were here started to collapse, continue collapse, westerly anomalies in control there and into the equatorial region, into Ecuador. So a definite from there and there, where you had this batch of strong easterly anomalies, to here, a far more relaxed trade wind pattern has been developing. Let's go look at the forecast. Here's the forecast for 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. Those are winds up about 4,700 feet, but a good proxy for what's going on down lower at the ocean surface. This is for the whole planet. The reds, westerly anomalies, roughly the active phase. The blues, inactive phase. Blues easterly anomalies, roughly the inactive phase. And you see, let's see, this is for the whole planet though. The date line, 180, so right up the middle of the chart. Far West Pacific starts about 125 east, so right here. So you see, since about the beginning of November, westerly anomalies have been trying to build into the West Pacific, almost making it to the date line right around the 23rd, 25th of November sort of thing. You see that pattern more or less continue. You got this little pocket of easterly anomalies here, but at the same time, 2 days out, westerly anomalies are supposed to set up over the date line. Then easterly anomalies continue, but you have stronger westerly anomalies in the far West Pacific as compared to up in here. So this is part of the pattern change we've been talking about. Westerly anomalies, which haven't even been in the Pacific at all for months, are finally making a foray into the far West Pacific, driven by the active phase of the MJO and this pattern change that we've been talking about. It's not an El Nino pattern change, but it's a move away from La Nina. We're in a very weak La Nina, not even barely a Modoki La Nina right now. And this is just, if this pattern continues, it's been forecast for months by the CFS model. It started happening sometime here in the first week in November and looks to be continuing for the foreseeable future, at least according to this model. Let's go dig a little deeper. Oh, and one other piece of data. So this is actual just GFS wind and standard wind speeds, but there's New Guinea, there's the equator, this is the far West Pacific. This starts at 135 east, and we're just looking at wind arrows, literal westerly winds here north of New Guinea, and that pattern continues to somewhere about here, 155 east. That has not been the case for months and months, but now a light wind regime, no trades, that would manifest itself as actual westerly anomalies. So that is a good sign. Outgoing long wave radiation forecast model. That is simply cloud cover. If you have warm, moist air associated with the active phase of the MJO being lifted up in the atmosphere, eventually it's going to hit cold air aloft. That's going to condense, create clouds. And if it's a persistent long pattern, which is what the active phase of the MJO is, it will make it so you get less sunlight reflecting off the ocean up into the upper atmosphere. That's what the blue is, negative anomalies, less outgoing long wave radiation. So South America, Central America, New Guinea, EQ is the equator, date line right there, Kelvin wave generation area right here. This is very typical, the active phase of the MJO over the West Pacific. Now notice it moves to the date line 5 days from now, this per the statistic model, holding 10 days from now, then kind of collapsing 15 days, 2 weeks from now, as the inactive phase of the MJO starts setting up. So we've gone through a period for months and months, from like April till up to, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, where we had literally no MJO. The MJO typically wakes up in the fall, and now we see that pattern happen. Active phase migrating to the inactive phase as the active phase makes its trek across the Pacific. All right. That was the statistic model. This is the dynamic model. Now, this is a little bit more optimistic in that, yes, the active phase fades, but the inactive phase fades at the same time. So look at the difference. Strong inactive phase with the active phase fading south of Hawaii. Here you go. Nada, nada, nada. This is the more favorable outcome. Phase diagrams for the same two models, statistic model, dynamic model. The MJO, how do you read the chart? MJO moves from west to east from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, over the West Pacific to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is. So moving from the West Pacific to the East Pacific, the further the dot is away from this circle, the stronger it is. This is, again, great news because all year long the active phase has just been hiding in this circle. Strong status in the, I'll call it the Central Pacific. 3 different forecast model runs have it, over Africa, moving back to the Indian Ocean, anywhere from very weak to moderately strong 2 weeks from now. The dynamic model has the active phase actually crashing weak, but holding basically in the exact same position as it is now 2 weeks from now. Again, this is the more favored outcome. And the GFS model going out 1 week, 180 hours. Here again, here's the main Kelvin wave generation area. Westerly anomalies, solid to about 150 east. And then you go here, no real trades setting up until you almost get to the date line. This is a week from now. So this is actually an improving pattern with likely the active phase moving off to the east. So far, everything's in sync. Now, here's a model that goes out 1 month, the CFS model. It's a dynamic model, sort of the long-range weather model, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. And this version of it runs a day behind. But again, international dateline right up the middle. This is east-west anomalies, the blues easterly anomalies inactive phase, the reds westerly anomalies active phase. This actually shows the MJO with a black contour, dotted contour, inactive phase here back in mid-October, and you see the easterly anomalies associated with it. Then we got a little hint of an active phase here in late October, early November, the beginning of westerly anomalies. You see, look here, it was all blues. Westerly anomalies encroaching into the West Pacific, encroaching more as we got into mid-November. And then here is another active phase, or fragments of the active phase over the next 1 to almost 2 weeks. Then here comes your supposed inactive phase, but notice neutral. I mean, it's sort of a mixed bag, but it's not like one of these or where it's all blues. It's sort of mixed pink or orange or red or whatever you want to call it, and just sort of a neutral weather pattern setting up as we get into the Christmas time frame with potentially an active phase building behind that. And then the CFS model, same model, but it extends out 3 months. This is the forecast up here, past performance. You can see the marked change in the pattern. Here's the date line running right up the middle. Far West Pacific starts at 125 east, so right there. Blue, 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 and then you got to about mid-November, and you see the yellows starting to encroach. And as you get, here we are today, yellows, westerly anomalies over the date line, and basically holding in some fashion the whole way from here forward. About last week, I think I officially declared that we are in a pattern change, but we were suspecting even 2 weeks before that. And it looks like the pattern change is in fact setting up, and we have more data to support that. But anyway, you see westerly anomalies forecast. Let's overlay the MJO. So here's the solid contour, active phase of the MJO, kind of weak, but working its way over the date line into about December 16th. Here's an inactive phase, but again, not very coherent. Westerly anomalies holding a weak active phase somewhere out in late January and beyond that. But the real key takeaway here is westerly anomalies from about right here, November 22nd, filling the West Pacific for the foreseeable future. The low-pass filter really tells the story. Low-pass filter, low-pressure bias. Your El Nino signal, the dotted contour, the high-pressure bias, your La Nina signal. So today, they are in a battle for control of the West Pacific with the low-pressure bias just right there, making it halfway across the Kelvin wave generation area at about 150 east, and forecast holding, but it is the high-pressure bias, the La Nina indicator, that you see even starting maybe 2 weeks out. This trailing edge starts migrating off to the east. By the time you're into the beginning of January, it starts a wholesale collapse and is all but gone. This is the collapse of La Nina, the pattern change that we've been talking about. Now, we're not talking about really going to an El Nino because, one, the slow pressure bias doesn't look particularly strong. Two, it's not moving a whole lot. Every run of the model, it sort of changes what it's doing up here, whether it holds pat or starts moving off to the east. I'm not going to count on it at all. But the fact that it is here and the high pressure bias is to decay over the next couple of weeks, that is a good sign. Subsurface water temperature profile. West Pacific here, East Pacific over here. This is data from the TAO buoy array. This is again, 2 degrees north to 2 degrees south on the equator across the entire Pacific. These are the anchor lines on the buoys. The X's are sensors strung down those anchor lines. They along with model data to fill in the gaps, give you an idea where the balance of west and east, where warm and cold water is. The stronger the trades, the more the warm water is balled up over here in the west. If the trades weaken, warm water starts shifting off to the east. The 29-degree isotherm, 29 degrees centigrade, pretty much exactly where it was last week. The 28-degree isotherm, within a degree or two where it was last week. But the bigger news here is the 24-degree isotherm, I think it was back at 125 last week, has eased a little bit off to the east, suggesting trades are dying here. Again, the active phase is just working its way across the West Pacific while the inactive phase is trying to exit out of the East Pacific. So there really hasn't been much time yet for anything to happen here, but I would expect over the next couple of weeks some of these contour lines are going to start shifting off to the east. It's not the actual water temperatures that matter, though. It's the anomalies. Difference from normal in this time of year. 3 degrees. This used to be 2, and at one point it was only 1 degree. So this suggests westerly anomalies over the Indian Ocean and the maritime continent are dumping warm water into the West Pacific. We just need the trades to slacken in the West Pacific so this can start moving off to the east. The other good news here, though, is this 2 degree below normal temperatures at 140 west. It was 3 or 4 degrees last week. It is weakening, and I expect to see this starting to collapse. We're also starting to see a warming of water temperatures up here, at least according to the TAO buoy array, here off of Ecuador out to, where's that, 140, so almost south of Hawaii. Here's more of the same data, TAO data buoy array, but also enhanced with satellite data. You see that plume of warm water extending further off to the east to about 145 west, so that's past Hawaii, just barely past Hawaii. And here's your cool pool. I want to see this, especially up in here, starting to turn more neutral and see this cool tongue here starting to dissipate. We're not seeing it yet, but this only updates every 5 days. It uses satellite data and takes 5 days to get a complete coverage of the Pacific Ocean. So, but I would expect maybe by last week we'll see some, or by next week we'll see some improvement in here. Here is the satellite data. This is sea surface height, not temperatures. South America here, Central America, equator, dateline, New Guinea there, Galapagos Islands right there. So if you have negative anomalies, that just means you have cooler water at depth. Cooler water at depth contracts. You'll end up with a little divot on the ocean surface. Positive anomalies are warm water at depth expands. It creates a little bump on the ocean surface. So you see that here, 5 to mainly 5-centimeter anomalies. Warmer water north of New Guinea, as is expected. Cooler water, here's your cool pool, but again, it's only 5 degrees north and south of the equator that really matter. So this is indicative of a La Nina pattern, not particularly strong. We want to see, in fact, I'm watching this, and I have seen this area of 10-centimeter anomalies right in here. It's getting smaller. The next update, which should be coming shortly, will, hopefully, show even less coverage of minus 10-centimeter anomalies. And here we go, upper ocean heat anomalies, takes all that data, sort of puts it into a time frame. This goes back to December 24th. This is the West Pacific. This is the East Pacific. This is last year's La Nina. You see how much deeper the blues are here. This is this year's La Nina. You see it really only basically two shades. I'm expecting any day to see this blue border here starting to retract off to the east. You see warming at times pushing this way. That's the active phase of the MJO. We know there's an active phase working its way across the Pacific now. So I'd expect to see this starting to push this way and the blue retracting. And once it retracts, I don't expect it to come back. Sea surface temperature anomalies, South America, Central America, New Guinea. There's your equator. There's your date line right there. Here is the blues are cooler than normal temperatures. Now, the dark blues were more prevalent over in here, but remember, we saw westerly anomalies starting to show up in this region, and instantly this starts reacting. I think this is updated every day. So the extent or the intensity of the cool anomalies not as strong here as they were, but still pretty much holding out in here. But we think over the next coming weeks, this is going to start decaying. The trend over the past 7 days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. More incidents of warming, less incidents of cooling temperatures, the blue cooling, the red's warming, and warming all along Chile, Peru, up into Ecuador. Maybe not as strong as last week, but suggests some sort of a change is trying to come the more the active phase of the MJO makes its way across the Pacific. The more the trades will slacken, the more the warming will start, and then the atmosphere eventually changing above that over a period of months. Now here is an alternate sea surface temperature analysis using the delta from the global average of sea surface temperature, trying to filter out the global warming signal. Both the charts do that. This just does it a different way. It shows the extent of the cooling a little bit stronger. I think this is a bit overstated. I think the previous charts were understated. More or less raw sea surface temperature data for the Nino 1.2 area, the area right there by the Galapagos and Ecuador. Temperatures actually coming up 3/4 of a degree below normal, 775 thousandths of a degree. That is as of today, and you see the trend the past 2 weeks is steadily upward. In the official El Nino monitoring region, the same sort of deal, the Nino 3.4 region, the area south of California on the equator out to almost the date line. Today's temperature is 1.079 degrees below normal. Again, from half a degree below to half a degree above is considered, just normal variation. Half a degree to 1 degree is considered weak La Nina, so we're just about back to weak La Nina territory. But the expectation is this will start rising fairly soon. The official sea surface temperature anomaly trend in the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. So back in July, we were about neutral. Finally dipped under half a degree, starting moving to La Nina in September. And then really started, and I mean, by really, we're talking 1/10 of a degree. October, 0.6 of a degree, 0.7. The 19th of November, 0.8. I think the model suggested in November, somewhere around this time, we'd get down to 0.75. And then if you've been following this, you know where the models go from about here on out. This is probably as deep as we're going to get. The current on the equator. We showed this last week, but last week we had, so if the trades are blowing, so you have high pressure here, they drive easterly trades. You have high pressure in the southern oceans, they create trades. we had a stronger easterly flow off of here, and normally the current flows up along here and out this way. Much weaker this week, but the real big thing that we looked at last week was here. The current, let's let that refresh. There we go. There's your easterly current. It was going the whole way over to here, which is like 125 east. Oh, even a month ago, that has collapsed. This spot right here is 170.96 east. So again, and you even see the beginnings of a weak little westerly current here. Maybe I can zoom in a little. There we go. Little bit of a westerly current. Now, nothing significant. If it were El Nino, instead of seeing the trades blowing as hard as they are here, it'd be westerly winds blowing the whole way across the Pacific. So this in no way suggests El Nino, but what it does suggest is just the death of La Nina and the beginnings of the return to ENSO neutral across the Pacific. And it's doing it at a time, at a really opportune time. So let's discuss this quickly. Typically, you see pulses in the MJO and the transition from El Nino and La Nina in the like January, February timeframe, if it's going to be a significant change. And if it's just going to be a very weak change, it might not even be till July or August, the year before it actually happens. So we're going to be watching this, especially as we get into January and February, and see what starts cooking over in this area. Is it going to be something stronger or just a weak westerly wind pattern? We're not sure, way too early to know, but we're going to keep our eyes on it. Outgoing long wave radiation anomalies, the blues are more clouds than normal. 125 is the entrance to the West Pacific here. And this is over time from a year. So last year, this was our setup. We had, yes, like the El Nino signals just barely had a toe in the door to the West Pacific, but the La Nina signal was quite strong, very much dry air over the date line. Here we are a year later, almost no dry air here, and a little bit more robust wet air pattern setting up in the West Pacific to 150 east. We want to see this easing off to the east as we get deeper into winter. And finally, our last indicator, the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, roughly over the maritime continent, and Tahiti, which is not in the West Pacific, but more like in the Central Pacific. It's actually further east than Hawaii. It's at 140 west. Okay? So, and when pressure is lower in Tahiti, which is an indicator of if pressure is lower in the Pacific, the index goes negative. Hey, we're negative, minus 2.04, just barely. And that transition started on the 24th of November. I don't remember when that was, like maybe Monday or Tuesday. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, for a week. Now, this indicates that pressure is dropping in the Equatorial Pacific, likely driven by the active phase of the MJO making its way across the Pacific. Prior, the daily data, you see how it was more or less very high. This was the inactive phase, and then starting November 24th, looks like we're moving to the active phase. 30-day average starting to fall, 13.95. It was up at 17.97 on the 23rd of November. Where was it a month ago? 11.69. So still, this looks like we're coming down from the inactive phase of the MJO. 90-day average, 8.92, 90 days. This isn't even going to reflect anything for probably 2 months till we start seeing these numbers if they continue. But where were we a month ago? 5.31. So this suggests pressure has generally been rising over the past 90 days in the Pacific, likely due to the beginnings of La Nina trying to get organized, but we think that is about ready to collapse. Let's go look at a graph. Yep, and as expected, here we go. The 30-day average SOI neutral is +7 to -7. So here was last year's Madoki La Nina. Here is this year's, the upward spikes at inactive phase of the MJO. Now we're starting to head down, and given the westerly anomalies are forecast taking over the West Pacific, we think we're going to be on a steady downward trend, hanging somewhere around neutral, maybe a month or so from now. And finally, sea surface temperature anomaly forecast from the CFS version 2 model in the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. The solid line actual numbers. So here we are. What is this? Minus 0.7 or 0.75. That's supposed to continue into about December 15th. And then here's what the model says. Look at this. Boom. Off to the races. It's suggesting El Nino-ish with a 1 degree above normal temperature range in August and heading up from there. I think that's a bit overblown. But the fact that basically in the next, well, what are we at? Oh, December 1st is tomorrow. So in the next 2 weeks, we're going to make the transition and start moving in a warmer oceanic pattern, a weaker pressure pattern in the Pacific as well. Now that's the raw data. This is the PDF corrected, but it's basically saying the same thing. And the CFS sea surface temperature anomaly forecast. All right, so there is Ecuador right there. There's the Galapagos Island. Here is our La Nina signal out to a little bit past the, oh, okay, we can see it exactly, 168.46 east. Okay, that's good. The cool anomaly pattern, again, just and I can do it this way, 5 degrees, there's 5 degrees north, 5 degrees south of the equator. That's all that matters, though you see it's clearly more than that. All right, so we're going to put this into motion. This is 1 month at a time forecast. So here we are. This is a forecast for December, January, boom. Look at the cold water, January, February, it's gone and we're neutral. March, still neutral. March, April, all of a sudden we get this sort of a generalized warming trend. March, April, let's see, May, June. Look at this. Look at the warming out here over the on the equator. June, July, August. I think that's the last it. But that clearly looks like a El Nino-ish pattern compared to where we are today. A rather quick transition in a matter of like 3 months. We go to neutral and another this is 9 months out, another 6 months past there, getting next fall, if you believe a model going out that far, at least a much better pattern. So for right now, swell hitting the Hawaiian Islands, bound for California, and called it swell number 2 of the season. Now, this is not because California is going to see that size. It's because Hawaii saw 15-foot plus surf, legitimate big waves, XXL, I guess you'd call it, waves into the Hawaiian Islands. After that, things settle down a little bit. A small bit of more energy really targeting Hawaii. California going to get a bit quiet till the jet stream sort of sorts itself out. But then I think we're going to get back into the groove. So basically this will be like a 2-week pause. And notice it's sort of tied to the inactive phase of the MJO, potentially setting up in the far west Pacific, stealing energy from the jet stream as the active phase plods its way across the Pacific to the east. Looking out longer term, though, I'm thinking even, sometime by I'll say late December, or mid-December, things should start looking much better swell-wise, and I think rain-wise and precipitation-wise for California. Don't hold me to that. Let me know what you think. I always love to hear your opinion. We'll see where it goes from there, but with the imminent demise of La Nina, the jet stream should start doing better, being fed by westerly anomalies in the West Pacific. That should feed the jet stream, which pushes it into California, which then will help bring us some precip. How much of that reaches down into Southern California and over into Colorado and Texas is yet to be seen. We would need a significant wholesale change. Snow is definitely lacking in all the southern tier states. I mean, the dividing line, again, is about 40 north. Basically the California-Oregon border. North of there, there's snow, but I think it's kind of warm up there as well, and they are having some issues as well. You got to go even further north. But to go skiing, it's very early season. We're Thanksgiving. Nobody really is wholesale skiing unless you live at Whistler up in British Columbia. That pattern should hopefully improve over the next month. Other than that, looking longer term, transition to ENSO neutral, if maybe not biased on the warm side as we get into next summer and beyond. Yes, we're giving you a forecast for 9 months out. Hard to believe, but with a little bit of magic juju, I think we can kind of at least get a 50% confidence level of what's coming, and I would say it's not La Nina. It's probably not going to be El Nino, but at least it'll be neutral. All right, that's our forecast for this week. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have an opinion, write it up down below in the comments. We'd be happy to hear it. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. We appreciate all your contributions. It really means a lot to us. And with that, we are done for this week. We will do it again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks so much for watching.